Dan Smoot has been described as America's most distinguished journalist. He is the author of The Invisible Government, The Hope of the World, and America's Promise. Mr. Smoot is known to millions of television viewers and students of political affairs for both his broadcasts and published versions of his highly authoritative Dan Smoot Report. It is from that series and his current writings in the Review of the News that we proudly present to you Dan Smoot in this first program in the new series of Dan Smoot Audio Reports.
Richard Nixon is without doubt the most audacious president this nation ever had. He who denounced the Democrat administrations which preceded him for their deficit financing and their piling up of national debt, ran more and bigger deficits and accumulated more national debt in 3 years than the Kennedy-Johnson administrations had contrived to do in 8 years. The Republican candidate who criticized Democrats for their soft handling of the communist enemies of our nation became, in less than 4 years, the president who abandoned our anti-communist allies in order to help our communist enemies. Now, that is what happened. The whole world saw it happen. It is all a matter of record. Yet, say it that bluntly to the average American, and he will not believe you. He cannot believe you. He saw it happen, but unless it can be explained to him in a way that is logical and acceptable to his sense of decency and patriotism, it is quite unbelievable to him. This stone wall of stolid, baffled disbelief reminds me every once in a while, and very poignantly, of Peter Jones. Peter Jones was a white Russian who came to Dallas to see me many years ago. He walked into my office and said,
"I have made a long trip to see a man who's as big a fool as I once was."
He got my attention with that remark and held it with a story. Peter Jones was an alias my visitor had assumed to conceal his true identity. He lived in a crowded neighborhood in a crowded metropolis on the eastern seaboard of the United States, a perfect place to hide. But he could not hide his memories. In September of 1917, some 2 months before the Bolsheviks seized power in Russia, Peter was graduated from what he called the old Russian equivalent of the U.S. Naval Academy and was commissioned an officer in the Tsar's Navy. His first command was a submarine, which he was to take on a training cruise through the Arctic Ocean in the spring and summer of 1918. Peter knew those were troubled times for Mother Russia. Armies of the Tsar had mutinied on the German front, and bloody revolution was in the making. But Peter Jones was young, imbued with the ideals of his profession, ignorant and scornful of what he called politics. Mother Russia had always been in trouble, but had always survived. His concern was his own career, to do well on his first command. Peter assumed that command on schedule in the spring of 1918, but profound and baffling changes had already occurred. He put out to sea under a flag new and strange to him. The Tsar, little father of all the Russians, was under house arrest, and a group of violent men known as Bolsheviks held the reins of power. Strangest of all to Peter was the presence aboard his ship of a political commissar, one Vasily Petrovich, a former university professor who had never had naval or military training. Peter was in technical command of his ship, but Vasily was in command of Peter. Vasily Petrovich was zealous about the dogmas of the revolution, yet he seemed a kindly man, especially toward Peter, whom he regarded as a mere boy. Peter wanted to know why he was given titular command of a ship which, in fact, Vasily commanded. Petrovich tried to explain. The revolution did not have enough trained professionals to run the military establishment and the industries of Russia. Until it could produce its own technicians, the revolution must use those who belonged to the old order. But while using them, it must carefully watch and control them to guarantee against counter-revolutionary activity. It was a long, lonely training cruise. All of the ship's communications were handled by 2 men, each of whom stood 12-hour watches every day, taking orders directly from the political commissar, having no contact with the young commander. Following the mysterious peremptory orders of Vasily, Peter anchored his vessel sometime in the middle of June 1918 at a place called Franz Joseph Land. For a month he stayed there, granting no shore leave to his crew, himself forbidden to leave the ship. Only Vasily Petrovich went ashore. The tedium was broken in the middle of a stormy July night when Vasily returned to the ship full of haste and excitement, and routed Peter out of his berth, ordering him to weigh anchor immediately and head back to his home port. Sometime during the return voyage, Vasily told Peter that the Tsar was dead, liquidated with his family on the night of July 16th. The submarine put into port in the late afternoon on July 25, 1918. For a long time, Vasily stood silently at Peter's side, gazing at familiar landmarks. He broke the silence with an order.
You will cancel all plans for shore leave, Peter. No one but me leaves the ship tonight. Aye. You will know tomorrow. When I return in the morning, many things will be made clear to you.
At noon, July 26, 1918, Vasily Petrovich returned and ordered Peter to take his entire crew ashore at once. When they reached the wharf, they were met by soldiers armed with submachine guns, and were escorted to an empty warehouse where they stood for 2 hours under heavy guard. Vasily had disappeared. About 2 p.m., a beefy, red-faced civilian bustled into the warehouse and barked an order. The submarine crew was formed in a column of 4s and marched through the streets of the town, flanked on both sides by soldiers. The streets were deserted, save for a few small clusters of people who stood in doorways, staring with looks of dumb terror in their eyes. On the outskirts of the town they came to an open field, in the center of which was a compound enclosed in barbed wire. Inside the compound was a rather large crowd of civilians, people of all ages, from babes in arms to very old men and women. Vasily was sitting in a lorry near the entrance. He summoned Peter to him before the sailors were marched inside the enclosure. There was a rush of affectionate and tearful greetings as the sailors mingled with the civilians. Vasily gave a sign, an officer gave an order, machine guns chattered, and the people inside the compound fell in grotesque heaps. Vasily Petrovich drove away, Peter sitting at his side, sickened with horror. Finally, Peter managed to say,
Why?
After a long silence, the commissar explained.
There was disaffection aboard your ship. We do not know how extensive or exactly who was involved. The revolution must liquidate its enemies. It does not have time for investigations. But the others, relatives. This way, no one is left behind to spread seeds of disloyalty. You are so blinded by bourgeois sentimentality, you cannot understand that to do what must be done to serve the revolution is kindness, not cruelty. The death of a few today will teach thousands what they must learn to avoid death. Well, what is that? That there is only one loyalty. Loyalty to the revolution. What about me? I am tainted with some of your sentimentality, Peter. At first I thought I could teach you, mold you into a useful instrument for the revolution, but by the time I realized that you are quite incapable of understanding communism, I have grown to like you. You must leave Russia at once, or it would be too late. Well, if you wanted to spare me, why did you not spare me the horror I have seen? Peter, I confess to some small taint of sentimentality, but I am not a sentimentalist. You know, I serve the revolution. I served it today, and in having you witness the revolution at work, you will go to the West now, and for the rest of your life you will serve the cause of communism. I am not the craven coward you think me. I will tell what I have seen to let the world know what beast you are. You will tell what you have seen, but who will believe you? Today you witnessed something more than simple execution. You saw a demonstration of a profoundly important tactic of the revolution. Do the incredible, and the bourgeois mentality will not give it credence. If you had gone to West telling tales of arrest in the night and drumhead trials, people might have believed you. No one will believe you now. The more you tell your story, the more you will discredit yourself. The more you discredit yourself, the more you will serve the cause of communism. Where we hold political power, we can simply liquidate the anti-communists. Elsewhere, we must make them ineffective by stigmatizing them as hysterical, lying fools. You will help us in that work by telling a horror story that no one will believe.
Peter went to the West, first to England, then to the United States. He wrote articles for magazines and newspapers, but all were rejected. Too lurid, too exaggerated. He made speeches and talked to individuals, but few believed him.
I became a crazy Russian, a typical anti-communist, babbling dishonest nonsense because I would not accept the 20th century.
Would you change your tactics if you had it over to do over again?
Oh, no, the communist technique of doing the incredible does tend to discredit anti-communists who tell the incredible, but that is only part of the harm it does. Many educated people in the United States who ought to be among the foremost in telling the truth about communism actually tell lies about it, or at least evade the truth. They are so afraid of being labeled witch hunters and ignorant red-baiters that they discuss communism as if it were a respectable political philosophy with which they happen to disagree. Such criticism of communism gives its respectability in the eyes of all who do not know the truth. The truth is that communism is not a political philosophy at all, but a bestial criminal conspiracy to achieve an international socialist dictatorship. There must be people in every generation who will do the unpleasant job of telling the harsh truth. Eventually, we old-time anti-communists convince the general American public that communism is a monstrous evil, even though we will always be remembered, if remembered at all, as fools. So I did what I set out to do. Present-day anti-communists have a more difficult task. They must direct their heaviest fire, not at card-carrying communists, but at some of the most prominent and popular people in the land.
Why is that?
Because the role of the Communist Party in the United States has changed radically.
Well, now, the Communist Party is still a transmission belt for the international communist line. It still operates fronts that do great damage. It still recruits and indoctrinates new members and seems to be making significant headway in universities, church organizations, and unions.
Yes, but there are secondary things important to the party as morale builders for the party faithful. The primary role of American communists now is to serve as decoys, to draw the fire of public criticism while others do the real work of advancing the socialist revolution.
Well, who are the others?
Oh, the hierarchy of liberalism. They, and not communists, they are the ones actually accomplishing the socialist revolution in the United States.
Do you consider liberals traitors to this country?
No, very few of them realize they are promoting the communist cause.
Well, then you consider them fools.
No, people can be fooled without being fools. American liberals who promote communism without realizing it fall generally into one of three groups. One, there are those who have been so saturated with liberal socialist propaganda that they do not know what communism is. This can happen to intelligent, educated people. It's a case of overexposure to propaganda and a little or no exposure to truth. And two, there are those who are blinded by desire for power and a place in history. They want to remake the country and everything in it so they will go down in history as men of vision and accomplishment. They become obsessed with strange changes and reform, unable to understand that some principles of government, economics, education, social organization, and spiritual faith are eternal and unchangeable, that they cannot be bent without being broken, cannot be broken without opening a Pandora's box of social evils. And three, there are the career politicians, incapable of thinking except in terms of party politics, who identify the interest of their party with the interest of the country. They fight for any program that seems to promote party interests at that moment.
Mr. Jones, in what specific ways do America's liberals promote communist causes?
Well, the communists want to destroy the lawful government of the United States. The non-communist political leaders are destroying lawful government by violating the Constitution, the only basis for lawful government. The communists want a socialist America. The non-communist political leaders are creating a socialist America. The communists want to confiscate American wealth, which capitalism has created, and scatter it abroad to serve the twofold purpose of paying for socialism in other nations and of achieving worldwide economic leveling. The non-communist political leaders of the nation are confiscating American wealth and paying for socialism all over the world. The ultimate communist objective is a worldwide socialist system in which the United States will be a mere unit, controlled by a world dictatorship. America's non-communist political leaders are moving toward that communist goal, unwittingly perhaps, but at a dizzy pace. That is the incredible truth which the present generation of anti-communists must tell the American people. The non-communist Americans who are advancing the communist revolution may not realize what they are doing, but wittingly or not, they use the communist tactic that Vasily Petrovich explained to me many years ago. do the incredible, and the bourgeois mentality will not give it credence.
For more than 20 years that I watched and reported on the advancing totalitarianism in the United States, as I saw the resources of the American people confiscated from them by government under the pretext of fighting communism, being used to establish communism in the United States, and to save and shore up the communist empire abroad, I often ask myself, have the American people lost their wholesome sense of righteous indignation? That is no longer a sensible question. Obviously, the American people have lost it. The question now is why? My Russian friend Peter Jones may have been right. Perhaps America's political leaders, by doing the incredible, have placed their acts beyond the credence of the public. From my studies of history, I am convinced the ancient Greeks understood the error we are making. Remember the mythological tale of Perseus and Medusa, written by Apollodorus in the 2nd century before the birth of Christ. Medusa was a Gorgon, one of 3 sister monsters, and they were 3, the Gorgons, each with wings and snaky hair most horrible to mortals, whom no man shall behold and draw again the breath of life. Perseus, a handsome young mortal, vowed to slay Medusa and bring her head as a gift to King Polydectes. The vow pleased Polydectes because he secretly hated Perseus, and believed that Perseus could not attempt to slay Medusa without being destroyed by looking upon her horrible countenance. But Hermes, god of science and invention, and Athena, goddess of wisdom, gave Perseus aid. Hermes equipped him with a sword that would not bend or break. Athena gave him her shield of polished bronze, and cautioned him, "Look into this when you attack the Gorgon. You will be able to see her in it as a mirror, and so avoid her deadly power." Anon Perseus found the hidden island lair of the Gorgons. With one sweep of the sword he beheaded Medusa, never glancing at her. His eyes were fixed on the shining shield, which mirrored her monstrous image. This myth of Perseus and Medusa had rich meaning for the ancient Greeks. It expressed a profound truth about human beings. They cannot be exposed to evil without being harmed, eventually destroyed. First exposure revolts them. More exposure brings indifference. Prolonged exposure brings active acceptance. And with acceptance, the hapless mortal becomes a participating part of the evil which at first repulsed him. Have the American people been so long and so gradually exposed to the corrupting of constitutional principles that they are no longer outraged, no longer care? The outraged remnant that does care must redouble its efforts. It must awaken the moral conscience of the people. It must inform the apathetic and stir them to political action. Political action to turn the rascals out before they devastate the land.
The program you have just heard is the first in the new series of Dan Smoot audio reports. For listings of more pro-freedom recordings and other materials such as the book The Invisible Government by Dan Smoot, write to us, Gary Allen Communications, Post Office Box 802, Arcadia, California, zip 91006.